What is spirituality? Let's talk about it. Hi, my name's David and welcome to Accidental Ascension. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what is spirituality. It was posed to me by one of my friends and I found it pretty difficult to answer. I had the feeling of what I wanted to say, but simply couldn't talk about it. So I've got my trusty notebook, and for those watching, great to see you. And for those listening, welcome. When I think about spirituality, it could have meant a lot of things, and my understanding is evolving. But as I sit right now, it is a different way of thinking. Or to be more philosophical, I'm going to be saying it's a different way to perceive your reality. And so these are lovely big words that I'm sure people do sort of toss around. But I'm going to talk through a couple of examples of where I've come from, and I'm going to call them the old way of how I would have perceived my reality versus a new way. Now, when I talk about the new way for me, part of these things I've been able to get awareness of, to understand, to embody, those type of things, or anywhere in between. It doesn't mean I'm thinking that I'm the perfectionist, because anyone who is on a spiritual journey will know that perfection is the way it's meant to be. When we get to the old way I would be perceiving parts of my reality would be I would find external validation or input. So I would be essentially driven by circumstances. And so when I think about what that meant, it is, well, for me to feel love, there would have to be certain things in place in my life. Either someone that loves me or someone that I loved. And with that, there would be conditions around that. Not that I was looking to put conditions there, but it sort of had to be. So when I look at sort of love as a separate concept, it's sort of like, what was the most important love in my life? Is it family? Is it friends? Or is it a partner? Is it someone I could be intimate and romantic with? So it was all very external. I would be judging if I'm doing a good job based on what I had around me, who I had around me, based on expectations. Now, if we sort of switch to what's the opposite of that? Well, it's all internal. And when I say it's internal, it's regardless of what's happening around you, you can feel peace, you can feel joy, you can feel love. It actually isn't conditional on what is around you. Now, as I talk about these concepts, in this video, we're not going to go into how I got into that. That will be the next video. And for those listening, it's going to be in the next episode. But this is just an idea of what is the difference between where I've come from and where I am now, and therefore where I am now, how I classify spirituality, because I never classified myself as being spiritual or even chasing spirituality before. So another one is lack, scarcity, I suppose, lack and scarcity mindset. There's only so much of something at any point. Now, I'm talking about this as a concept, not being a physical constraint, but as a concept. So when you feel as though there is just lack all around, or there's simply not enough for everyone, it creates competition. It's competitive behaviors. It means that someone has to go without for someone else to get it. So when you look at someone who has a lot, it's because there's only a certain amount, then that's taken away from you. Versus what an abundance mindset is. And an abundance mindset is about having everything you need when you need it to fulfill your purpose. Now, the interesting thing about the lack mindset versus the abundant mindset, The lack mindset will always be looking into the future. Do I have enough for this point in time? Where an abundance mindset will also look at, the abundance mindset will look at, do I have exactly what I need right now to fulfill my purpose or to be happy in this moment, not going into the future. Now, don't confuse this with being irresponsible and blasé and a she'll be right attitude. It's not. There are some fundamental differences, which we'll get to in another video. The next one's going to be, and we've all heard this, I'll believe it when I see it. Seeing is believing. Show me the evidence that something exists and then I will believe it. Up until then, I might not. What if believing was seeing? So this is where it comes to the concept of manifestation and to bringing things to you that you need, as opposed to only believing it's possible when it simply arrives. And that can be quite confronting because it's sort of like, well, am I being crazy? Is that something that I should be working towards? As opposed to, well, if I believe unicorns exist, shouldn't they just pop out of the air? Not necessarily. What we're talking about is if you believe that you will have everything that you need and you work towards that and you clear the fears, and a lot of this is going to be clearing old programming, why couldn't it happen? So again, how we get to that is going to be in another video. But for now, we're just going to talk about sort of the broader concepts. Next one's my favorite. Things happening to me. And when I say things happening to me, it's things are against me most of the time because they're the ones that I mainly remember. And so it could be as simple as I get 4 red lights in a row. And normally that happens, or I notice it the most, when I'm running late. Versus things are happening for me. So when things happen for you, there's something that's being shown to you through an emotion or through something in your body which is coming up to be released. And again, these could be programs, these could be limiting beliefs, these could be things that are keeping you in a lower vibration, that as part of this whole spirituality journey, it's to release things that don't serve you. The next one is the difference between ego-led versus heart-led decisions. So for me personally, ego is, in my definition, different to sense of self, because you need to have a sense of self. But ego is the judgmental part of the sense of self, is the competitive part of the sense of self. It's the judgment side of the sense of self. So am I better than you? Are they better than me? Do I have more money? Am I better looking? Does someone have more hair than me? And for those listening to the podcast, I don't have much hair. All of these things. And so when we put that sort of ego thinking, it's like we're trying to better ourselves or one up others to feel better, as opposed to heart-led, which is from compassion and empathy. This one is something that I really, truly struggled with, and for me was almost like the entry point into my journey. And again, we'll cover that in another episode. But from a heart-led point of view, it's about not competing, but understanding. So if someone has done a good job or they've got more than you, then you can appreciate it. You're not diminished by their success. You can celebrate without being fake. You can look at what you have and share. It's a very powerful concept that, again, I'd love to go into detail as we go through these series, but in another episode. And that leads me on to basically competitive thinking, which is the old way, versus collective thinking. Well, again, if you start to join all of these concepts together, ego-led with lack mentality, then comparative thinking is the only way to get ahead. And you need to get ahead because that drives success. That drives how you feel about yourself. Again, is that a place that we're trying to create? Versus the collective thinking, which is about, it's not about winning a race, but we all win together. Now, don't get me wrong. I love watching Formula One. I love watching these sort of competitive sports. But when it comes to how I interact with people, when we take away the lack mindset and we understand, or we work in the abundance mindset, there's enough for everyone to do what they need at any one time. Then why can't we all win? Why does having more make us more successful? It's a very interesting question to ponder. The next one I've got down here is in the old side, I have duty versus purpose. So duty is you have to do something either because you're told or you're expected to do something. And who hasn't felt that before? Versus purpose. Well, you choose to do something because it is something that you are drawn to. And the biggest difference I perceive between duty and purpose is the fact that you don't feel bad doing it. Now, when you're doing things with purpose, like I'm doing now, it doesn't stop it from being hard. It doesn't stop it from being challenging or confronting. But it's not sort of something which is like an eye rolling, I don't want to do this, I'm sick of it, but I have to ... And look, I get it. When we're all trying to make $1 to keep the bills paid, especially at the moment, at the time of this recording, probably one of the most difficult inflationary economies at the moment with very high interest rates, the cost of living crisis is real. I'm not underestimating how hard it is and why you have to do things out of duty. But to think that that is the only way to get things done is what I'm talking about. It's exploring and being curious about what is your purpose. And from that purpose, being able to generate an income. Again, when we tie that into, I believe that I can make money from my purpose. I have passion about my purpose. And I'll believe it to see it, as opposed to the other way around. Again, manifesting it. It's how these concepts tie in together. I'm being overly simplistic, but why isn't it possible? And it moves on to the next one. Expectations versus passion. When you're expected to do things, because that's the way your parents have done it, that's the way society has always done it, that's the way everything's been done before, versus following your passion. And so normally when I think of passion, normally it's got to do with things like passionately loving someone, or being passionate about art, or being creative. Now imagine if you took passion into everything that you do, and imagine yourself for a moment that when you do something, you're doing what you are passionate about, and you're doing it with passion. You're creating all the time. When you go to work, you're creating something. You're creating a moment. You're creating an experience. You're creating a product. You're creating a service. It's all creation. So imagine following your passion into the creation. Have you ever been into a shop or met someone that loved what they did so much that you just couldn't help it but just be drawn into everything they're saying, love the product regardless of what it is? That's the passion I'm talking about, versus when you go into a shop and someone's there because they're expected to be there. Or maybe it's because it's a duty. This is the difference that I'm talking about. The last one I want to talk about is the difference between right and wrong, or the concept of something is or is not for you. So when we say something's right or wrong, there is a definitive yes or no. Now, I can see it in the comments. This is the difference between morals and values. I can just imagine someone saying murdering someone is wrong. Okay, now we're talking about values, now we're talking about morals. But let's just say, for example, when you think about what someone is doing, say on their life path, should they be doing this or should they be doing that? And you judge that to be right or wrong. You're judging it based on your own perception. Your perception is that I wouldn't do it, it's not for me, therefore it's wrong for you to be doing it. Where imagine you take the judgment out of it and you just worry about for yourself, instead of worrying about what other people are doing or what other people tell you to be right or wrong, you simply ask yourself the question, is this direction for me? Or is this direction not for me? Because the direction may not be for you, but it could be for somebody else, whether it be a karmic direction where a lesson needs to be learnt, or a person that they're meant to meet, or whatever it is. When you take the judgment out of it and you look at it from a is or is not for you, then suddenly you don't have to worry about if it's right or wrong. Because how much time do we spend telling ourselves or telling others you're wrong? Or someone's trying to convince you they're right. Imagine if we took those conversations, took the energy and refocused it on, okay, I understand that might be for you. It is not for me. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. Pretty powerful. And I know there's going to be exceptions to all of this, but think about it from a values and morals point of view. So overall, this is kind of my idea of when you start to look at the new concepts and you start to bring that into your life bit by bit. It's not going to be like you click your fingers and suddenly whoop, you're all there. But imagine it from a point of view as you start to learn how to bring those in. Because I haven't gone into how do you bring these concepts in. The next episode is going to be about how I brought these concepts in or opened the door to these concepts being in. Then wouldn't that be a world you'd want to live in? Anyway, really happy that you dropped in to join me on this episode. Take care. I'll see you next time.